So if you have issues with anxiety, depression, focus, you probably have some energy issues that you're not even looking at. I feel that human connection is like one of the most nourishing things for optimal metabolic health. It really creates the conditions where you just lower your inflammation level.
Dr. Molly, you talk about this concept I really liked in the new book called energy capacity. So first of all, let's talk about what that is. And then I want to talk about what are some of the top things that are depleting that.
Yeah. I mean, so first and foremost, to understand health, you need to understand the role of mitochondria in health, right? Because mitochondria are essentially the seat of disease or health, and they create our energy capacity. So when I figured that out, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I figured the holy grail out of health. Like, this is so cool. Like, I finally understand what health is about. And because I've been studying health my entire career, but yet most of what you learn in medical school is disease. And studying health is not the same as fixing disease. It's actually, they're different things. You have to learn different ways of thinking about the body. So when I was thinking about energy capacity, I was basically taking what I had learned about mitochondrial health, and I was trying to translate it for a mass market audience that like maybe doesn't know what a capacitor is, right? So not everybody took physics in school. And so when you hear the word capacitor, you don't like, what does that even mean, right? But when people hear the word battery, they're like, oh, I know what a battery is. And what a battery is an electrochemical gradient that creates charge. And what a capacitor is two membranes. It's a differential charge between the two membranes that enables the charge to be deployed very quickly. So battery power is like slow backup power, and capacitor power is like what's available now to do work. So we need energy to do work, right? Like that is literally, like I think the definition of power is work over time. So literally like powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria, they're literally creating and generating energetic charge in order to do work so that you have this power to accomplish what it is that you need to do in your life. And I've always been trying to think about things from a first principles perspective. And that was really what kind of led me to the mitochondria, because basically they're not just the powerhouse of the cell, but they're also sensing it and integrating the environment and deciding where the energy goes. So they're kind of like the general contractors of the cell. And if you think about a house that has the energy cut 50%, like in a brownout in California, for example, you're going to have things break down, because if you don't have enough energy to do work, stuff breaks. So this is the thing about energy capacity. If your body lacks enough energy to do the cellular processes that it needs to maintain homeostasis, or for example, like homeostatic endpoints would be like your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your temperature, right? If your body doesn't have enough energy, these biomarkers are going to shift and change. And so the body can start to malfunction, and we can start to develop signs of chronic disease. And, you know, when people are always asking, well, how do you know if you have low energy capacity? Well, it's pretty simple. Like, does your skin emit light? Do you have a bright glow to your skin? Do you have, do you basically have good fitness? Like VO2 max is one of the biggest factors in long-term health, and it's basically one of the biggest longevity biomarkers is things like VO2 max, which is your oxygen carrying capacity, and your grip strength. So that's like a marker of your aerobic exercise capacity, your cardiovascular health, or your strength, right? Flexibility. You know, people as they get older, they become stiffer. You know, their body loses that flexibility that enables them to be more pliable, to be more resilient. Mood destabilization, focus problems. Oftentimes that's a mitochondrial issue, and that's a brain issue. So if your brain, there's a great book that was written by a guy, Christopher Palmer just wrote a book called Brain Energy. And it's funny because it's coming out around the same time as my book, but there's a movement towards understanding the role of metabolism and mental health. So if you have issues with anxiety, depression, focus, you probably have some energy issues that you're not even looking at. Problems with detoxification, problems with digestion can often be a sign of energy deficiency as well. So if you don't have enough energy to properly detox, your body's going to have problems with detoxification. So skin can look sallow, look gray, breakouts. That's also a sign of insulin resistance is acne. Premature gray hair in a young person is a pretty good signal that there's mitochondrial dysfunction, and then you have lower energy capacity because you're increasing peroxide in the cell, which is creating the graying effect. So it's funny because there was actually a study done on mice, And they programmed the mice to have a switch where if they gave the mice this drug, it would turn off mitochondrial biogenesis, which is producing more mitochondria, producing more batteries and power plants. And so they gave the mice the drug, turns off the mitochondrial biogenesis, and the mice start to wrinkle, they start to gray, they start to lose their hair, and then boom, they turn off the drug and they age in reverse. They go back to having black hair, no wrinkles, looking young again. And it was such a beautiful design of a study because it was just such an important message of how important mitochondrial biogenesis is to aging and disease.
All right. So to highlight what we've gone over there, mitochondria, they're super important when it comes to this energy capacity. And you've talked about a lot of the things that we might notice if our energy capacity starts to dip.
Yeah.
But let's hit on now some of the things in our environment, things we're doing day to day that are causing that dip.
Yeah. So big ones is toxins, right? Like I really thought detoxification and toxicity was like a bullshit thing when I was in medical school. Then I got to actual practice of medicine and I realized, oh my God, houses can be sick. You can live in a moldy home that can drain your energy and can cause all sorts of dysfunction in your cells. You can drink water. Tap water should not be drank. Do not drink your tap water. Unless you live in and you have a spring that you've tested and you know is healthy. Really big, not a big fan. And then air quality. I mean, I have 2 air purifiers in my home for a reason, because I want to have clean air. And living in a polluted area, living in a place that doesn't have a lot of good quality air is a problem, you know? So I lived in San Francisco for a while and I lived in the heart of the Mission, and there was quite a lot of pollution to the point where I could see it in the air on days that there was a lot of cars driving. And then obviously like smoke is not a good thing in the air, right? So, you know, smoking is obviously not great. Vaping is horrible for health. Having tried vapes before, like I've actually tried them, they're insanely addictive. The amount of dopamine that you're getting from a vape pen is extraordinarily addictive. It's not healthy. And so these vape pens are giving people all sorts of heavy metal toxicity, hormone dysfunction. And then there's the food that we're eating, right? So overeating packaged, processed, ultra processed fast foods and processed foods is damaging mitochondrial function and draining your energy capacity and breaking the engines of the cell, because these things create metabolic gridlock. And that metabolic gridlock is basically pouring too much fuel into an engine that can't handle it. So what happens? Well, if you can't metabolize all the fuel that you're putting in your body, where is it going to go? Well, your blood sugar is going to get metabolized first because your body prioritizes sugar metabolism over fat metabolism, especially in a high insulin state. And then if you got all this extra fat lying around that's not being digested, where's it going to go? It's going to leak into your visceral cavity. It's going to go straight from those organs, those digestive organs. It's like, well, can't digest this right now. So where's it going to go? So that fat gets into the visceral cavity. And this is my personal belief around visceral fat formation. It's like, it's people are over consuming hyper processed, ultra processed foods. And these were not a part of our diet 100 years ago. And there's a reason why we're so sick. And it's because of these foods are poisonous. And any country in the world that adopts our diet gets sick. They end up with chronic diseases, just like us. So you got to eat whole foods, whole unprocessed foods. I mean, I make my own, I cook my own food all day long. That's what I eat with my own food. So I don't really eat out that much, because when you order food from like delivery places, they're almost always have added salt, sugar, and fat to make things taste better. And that those added things make things hyper palatable. So just eating out all the time can be a huge source of extra unnecessary calories that you wouldn't normally eat if you cooked at home. And what else are toxins in our or things that can be problematic for mitochondrial function? I mean, just eating all day long and not getting enough of a fast in can be a problem for overall metabolic health. So I'm not saying everybody needs to fast, but you certainly should be trying to get at least 12 hours a night. That will make a big difference in your overall health. And then lack of exercise, right? So your mitochondria want to use your fuel. They don't want to sit. It's like having a garage and having a car in a garage that's not being moved. It's like going to generate exhaust if it's turned on, right? So you don't want to sit around all day long. Sedentary behavior is terrible for metabolic health. And then stress. So stress can make you stronger in small amounts, but too much stress can break you. So chronic stress over time causes metabolic dysfunction, because cortisol's job is to raise blood sugar. So you can have, I mean, I had high cortisol this year from just really challenging myself to see if I can accomplish like an enormous amount of things in 1 year. And I did a lot, but it was not good for my cortisol levels. So about, I guess it was October, I checked my cortisol and I was like, uh-oh, I'm high cortisol, need to change my lifestyle. So I cut back on the intense exercise. I started doing more yoga. I started doing more meditation, started drinking less coffee, started drinking more adaptogens.
It's interesting the way you talk there. It gets me thinking about an analogy when it comes to stress, where it's like a cup that's become overflowed.
Yeah.
And you're talking about it from, all these other angles when you go over that limit and then bringing that down through adaptogens and different means. So
yeah.
Do you feel the same way? Stress is kind of like this accumulation of different things in the environment. And when they all come together with a synergy and push things beyond a certain point, that's when things break?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the one thing that I think I've done fairly well in this book that has not been done well by a lot of people is people don't know how to conceptualize stress. So like when we're talking about stress, it's not just acute life stressors like divorce or natural disaster, flooding of your basement. That's obviously acute stressors are problematic, but they sometimes can make you stronger as long as they're not continuous. Now, chronic stress is like that unrelenting crap in your life that just doesn't end. Like that conflict with your partner, your coworker that you have not dealt with, that will wear you down. I have certainly experienced I really don't think people really understand this, but like the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. So if there are people in your life that are toxic, that are problematic to you, you really got to get rid of them. I mean, sometimes you just got to say, look, we're not getting along and we've tried to work this out. And like, I'd say it's important to work through relationship conflicts, like heavily, like that needs like professional help. But if there's just someone that you're dating and you're just finding that like this person is really toxic and really problematic for your mental health, like it's okay to just break up and move on. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of crazy people out there, but the goal is to basically surround yourself with people that you can love and trust and that really see you for who you are as a good person and a happy person. So there's chronic stress, but then there's generalized unsafety theory of stress, which is basically that your brain is on safety unless it's told it can be unsafe. So what makes your brain feel unsafe? Being isolated and alone, having poor visibility in your environment, such as during fog, a snowstorm, a wildfire smoke, things like that. Just driving around at night in the dark. Noise pollution, living in a big city, living in an environment that has a lot of noise. And then just being out of shape and being obese and overweight and not having good cardiorespiratory fitness, that will create the conditions where your body will not feel like it can escape danger if it needs to. So that's generally unsafe. And then lastly would be what am I missing here?
Well, I'll just jump in here while you think about that and go ahead.
People living outside, like homelessness. Yeah. I'm just going to say homelessness is like people are living outside. They're not safe. They don't have a roof over their head. And they're often unshowered. That's actually perceived as the body as deeply unsafe.
One thing I'm really taking from what you're saying there is the stress has to be chronic for it to be a problem. And then stress isn't always a negative thing. Where you talked about fasting, you talked about exercise. These are actually in the right dose at the right time, good stresses for the body, and they cause us to become stronger. Yeah. So we can't just look at stress as this big encompassing umbrella term. We have to look at it in these different areas and different pillars in our life. And you mentioned relationships being one. And coming back to the point I made before, it's like if you have these chronic stresses or acute building up together and causing you to go beyond a threshold, that's when you can really start to fall apart.
Yeah. And it's also about realizing that there are a few other types of stress that can be good or bad. So one is hormesis, right? So when you do sauna, cold plunge, when you do breath work, and when you do exercise and recovery, right? These are basically toggling back and forth between what are called mitohormetic stressors. And that can activate natural defense mechanisms that will make you stronger, specifically to predict tomorrow's risks of stress. So Now, if you do all these mitohormetic stressors in the context of an incredibly high stress load, it can actually make you less strong. So you got to still deal with the bigger causes of the stress cup overflowing before you just go and do a bunch of these hormetic stressors. Because sometimes what you really need is recovery, just to drain that cup, Now, there's also trauma and unresolved trauma, adverse childhood experiences, sexual trauma, social injuries can be traumatic, ostracism. But people often don't really want to look at trauma because they want to bury it, right? It's like, I don't want to look at that thing that happened to me. That was terrible. Well, looking at the trauma and working through it can actually lighten a lot of your energetic stress load on your body, because it's basically kind of removing malware from the brain. So when you have an unresolved major life trauma or PTSD level trauma in your body, sometimes that can put your body in a state of hyper arousal. And in that state, you're using a lot of energetic resources just to function normally. And you're also reacting to things that should be reacted to as not that big of a deal. You're like kind of reacting to them as though they're a really big deal. So to me, that's kind of a key facet of optimal mental health, is actually like working through your traumas as well. Because that can often be a big thing in the background.
Let's stick on the trauma piece. I think this is important. And for somebody that is unsure right now whether they have trauma in their life, how do they go about figuring that out?
Yeah.
And then if they do, how do they find a safe space where they can deal with that in a healthy way?
Yeah.
At the right time. Again, we keep coming back to this concept of doing these different things at the right time, so it's not too much at once.
Yeah.
Overwhelming the person.
Yeah. I mean, one of my friends uncovered some sexual trauma that she had and found herself feeling pretty destabilized by it. And so first and foremost, it's really important that you just have a therapist to talk to, somebody to like work through the energy that you're carrying with someone who's objective, someone who doesn't really know you very well, that like you don't have to feel like, ideally you want to trust them, but you should be able to be vulnerable with them without feeling like afraid. So getting a good trauma therapist, getting a good EMDR therapist, just somebody who can help you deal with the acute issues that are coming up. And then I really love the book No Bad Parts by it's a book on internal family systems. And I love internal family systems because it's a way of thinking about how to conceptualize the part of yourself that has been traumatized and the parts of yourself that are defending yourself in order to stay functioning. So there's the manager, the firefighter, and then the exile. And so keeping an awareness that the exile is kind of like shoved under the rug and pushed away, that's the part of yourself that's been hurt, that needs attention and care and love. And then the firefighter is the part of yourself that is basically like trying to put out the flames by, sometimes drugs, alcohol, sex, you name it, the things that are unhealthy coping mechanisms, food, escapism, things like that. And then from on top of that, there's the manager, which is the part of yourself that tries to like keep things together in your normal life. And a good internal family systems therapist can help you drop in to a relaxed state mentally, where you can work in that state of feeling calm, cool, collected, and like explore that traumatized part of yourself without feeling like you're activated. Because the key is you want to be in a state of calm while you're experiencing, while you're going into those painful memories and you're not reacting to them. So, this is part of the reason why MDMA therapy is about to be approved for PTSD. It's because it basically shifts the nervous system into a state of love while you can explore, PTSD level stressors. So that can be done with or without medicine. You can do it with just bringing up like a really beautiful memory of something that in your past that really made you happy, while you're concurrently thinking about something that was really traumatizing. And you can actually start to shift the memory that way. This is a type of framework that I learned through a trauma healing school called Mindlight, that my friend Megan Lillian run in Austin. It's a great school on trauma.
And for somebody who's hearing you talk about this and they might feel like their trauma isn't such a big deal and they want to work through it themselves, you gave a book recommendation there. How often do you feel like somebody can take this on themselves when they want to get in and do the work versus, you mentioned, a therapist? Is that something that's, often recommended to work with somebody when you're dealing with this stuff?
I mean, if I could go back, in time to when I started really uncovering my issues, I would totally have gotten a therapist. Now, I didn't because I wanted to do it on my own, but I think I stalled my progress by trying to do it DIY. Trauma has become a lot less taboo in the last few years. 10 years ago, when I was dealing with my own uncovered trauma from college, I was just like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just figuring it out on my own. But I think there's a lot more that people can do with help than they can do on their own. And narrative therapy is a really great tool. So just like writing out your traumatic experience and then going to a therapist and talking about it, and then next week writing it out again. It's kind of like a form of exposure therapy where you're slowly getting the goal is to take the traumatic experience and make it a boring memory, you know? And there's a great podcast by Andrew Huberman on trauma that I would highly recommend everyone listen to if you're listening to this. It does a good job at explaining the role of trauma in health.
All right, let's come back to the mitochondria piece.
Sure.
And we talked about it from the angle of what's depleting the energy. So I want to talk about mitochondria in general. We know that they're essential when it comes to this energy capacity. When we're talking about taking care of the mitochondria, are we talking about improving their function, making more of them, making them bigger? Let's get into the physiology of what's happening there from a positive influence.
So when I first started thinking about mitochondrial health, I was like, oh, mitochondrial biogenesis must be good and mitophagy must be good, and we should always be turning over mitochondria. But I do think it's a little bit more complex than that. Really what we want is proper mitochondrial quality control. So we want to make sure that we have properly functioning mitochondria, that they have the ability to throw out the ones that no longer carry a charge effectively, and that we're consistently sending the signal to make more of them. And so this is why exercise is fundamental, because that is the signal to make more energy. This is why it's important to watch what you eat, because that's what's charging those mitochondria with energy. And then lastly is occasionally cutting back on how much you consume, just like lowering your calorie intake or fasting occasionally is great for mitochondrial quality control. So just kind of like understanding that we have this design of our bodies based on our genetics, and that has been lost to modern lifestyles. And so our genetics are designed to go without food and to move our bodies all day long. And now we're sitting in front of computers and eating all day long. So, some of the key facets of optimizing mitochondrial function are really just kind of the things that I've mentioned, which is not breaking them in the first place with the kind of diets that are poisonous to mitochondrial function. Optimizing gut health is a big one that a lot of people can overlook, but if you have inflammation in the gut, there's a lot of mitochondrial microbiome crosstalk. So if you have mass amounts of inflammation in the gut, that's going to cause leaky gut and lead to endotoxin in the bloodstream, which is going to contribute to systemic inflammation. And that's not optimal either. So that'll affect your lipids and whatnot.
Well, let's stick on the gut piece here for a while. You dedicate a whole chapter in your book to this. For somebody who wants to get in and see where they're at when it comes to gut health and get a picture, is there a certain test you recommend to start off? And then I want to get into some of the nuances of taking care of the gut, maybe some specific supplements or protocols we can do to enhance the gut health. Let's really unpack this.
Yeah. So I would say gut testing is still fairly controversial in the medical communities, but I personally find them to be highly beneficial for optimal health. So I use a GIFX test on all my clients, and it's particularly helpful if somebody's like just taking antibiotics, because you can really see dysbiosis when someone's taking antibiotics, and you can be like, hey, you clearly wiped out your good bacteria. Let's replace those with some probiotics. I've also picked up things like inflammatory bowel disorders, elevated eosinophils. Clearly someone's reacting to something in their diet. And blood and stool. I found a client that had blood in his stool, and he ended up having a polyp that he needed removed, that if he had not removed, he would have ended up with colon cancer. So that's kind of interesting if you think about it that way. Aside from that, a lot of people have sort of like poor digestion in general, and they may need digestive enzymes. And you can see that on these tests if someone needs to add enzymes to their day. So I like to use these tests because it can tell me like, do they have good bacteria growing? Do they not? Do they need more Akkermansia? Do they have too much Methanobacter smithii, creating too much methane? Do they have signs of too much bacteria? Maybe they have overgrowth. Things like that can be problematic for optimal health. So, seeing if somebody has small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is also helpful.
All right, so we know there's a testing for people that want to get into the details, get into the weeds, and really find out what's going on.
It's helpful to get a functional doctor or a naturopath, by the way, if you're going to do this.
Okay. So for somebody who, say, isn't going to do that, but they want to take care of their gut health, maybe it's finances, maybe they can't find a good doctor, and right away they just want to get in there and start doing good things when it comes to the microbiome. Sure. You mentioned probiotics. Talk about how somebody navigates that world, because there's so many different ones out there. Some need to be refrigerated, some don't. Soil-based, spore-based, we could go on and on.
Yeah.
How does somebody begin to determine the right probiotic for them?
Well, I've had kind of like mixed experiences with spore-based probiotics with clients, so I'm not as wild about them as some other doctors are. But, I really like Visibiome in general for people who've just taken antibiotics. I really like Pendulum if somebody has metabolic dysfunction. It's an Akkermansia. And then there's a probiotic for there's really a probiotic for every problem these days. I love the company Biooptimizers. They do a lot of really good research on probiotics. They have one called Cognibiotic. It's a probiotic for brain health. And then there's another company, Seeking Health, makes a histamine X probiotic, and it's great for people who have too much histamine formation in their body. So somebody who is reactive to a lot of, if you eat like cured meats or leftovers, or and you don't react well to that, and your body gets a little bit stuffy, or you have just naturally more eczema and atopy and asthma, like sometimes that's just too much histamine production. And so just lowering that histamine can help with histamine X. So you got to be really careful though. Some people who just kind of fly blind with probiotics, they may end up causing more problems. So if you take a probiotic and you feel worse, it's a pretty good sign that it's not the right probiotic for you.
Earlier, you talked about taking antibiotics and then incorporating probiotics to counteract that. This comes back to what you talked about, what we've been talking about, the mitochondria. And I've heard you talk about how mitochondria, there's this theory where they're actually bacteria that have been engulfed by human cells.
Yeah.
So what comes to mind when I start thinking about that whole concept is the fact that if we're taking antibiotics, they're going to have a negative impact on the mitochondria within the body. So is there any research in that?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of evidence that antibiotics can actually cause mitochondrial dysfunction pretty directly, because there's a lot of similar machinery in a bacteria and a mitochondria. So it's not surprising that these things can cause, some issues. So yeah, there's a lot of evidence on this. So you do want to try to avoid antibiotics as much as you can, but I understand sometimes you have to take them.
Let's talk about taking a food-based approach. We went into probiotics and some different options for people. But for somebody who wants to start including more fiber in the diet, fermented foods, how do you feel about that, and how much can get accomplished just taking the food route?
Yeah. So remember that when it comes to so if you're a high histamine producer and you eat a lot of sauerkraut and fermented foods, you might end up feeling worse. So you got to listen to your body. So not everybody's going to need tons and tons of ferments. But if you do really do well with fermentation, it can make a major difference in how you feel. So I would say definitely try to develop a relationship to your body where you can hear what it's telling you. Because if you don't listen, you're not going to be able to hear it. So if you take a bunch of, I love Coconut Cult personally, because it's a live yogurt. It's not a dead yogurt. Most yogurt's dead. So most yogurt has no live active cultures. And they're just they just throw a bunch of dead cultures in and they call it yogurt. But I'm a big, big believer in live active cultures. And so, when I eat Coconut Cult, I get better digestion. I have better stools. I have better mood, better focus. That's a good sign. If you are if you take, fermented foods and you feel worse, and you get more bloated, you get more issues, you might actually have some small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And you might be actually pouring more bacteria into a system that has too much growing in the first place. So that's kind of a key concept, is recognizing where you're at with your personal digestion and your personal, health journey.
Which would come back to how we opened up, talking about testing, getting that baseline.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm still going to be, I've always been a proponent of testing but you do got to find a good doctor who can interpret the tests, and some of these are kind of complicated to interpret.
So we went into antibiotics. Let's talk about other things in the environment that are having a negative impact on the microbiome.
I mean, the big one, again, is always going to be the wrong foods, but also glyphosate isn't everything. So one of the big reasons why I don't consume a lot of grain is because it's glyphosate content. And I have a very sensitive tummy. And if I eat a lot of grain, my gut just gets ripped to shreds. So if you have autoimmunity, if you have Hashimoto's, if you have any autoimmune condition, you should very much consider a paleo diet or a Walls protocol diet, and just see how you feel. Because I'm not really I personally don't think everybody needs to be as restrictive as I am, but I have celiac and I get really reactive to the wrong foods. And so I do eat dairy now, and I do eat occasionally. I'll have some grain, but my body really kind of blows up when I eat a lot of rice or a lot of grain. My body just gets swollen. I can feel it. So it's not great for me, but you may work awesome for you. So if you do really well with pulses, go for it. If you don't, that's okay. And so it's going to take some trial, but some people really do a lot better off of grains and beans because their microbiomes have been compromised. That being said, there's a big movement towards carnivorism, and I'm not a big believer that carnivore diets are healthy long term. Most of the research that I've read has suggested that omnivore diets are the best for longevity and health and happiness. And so, I don't know. I'm an omnivore by nature. I do eat meat. I'm not as worried about red meat as I was when I was younger, but I eat a fair amount of red meat, but I also get it directly from a farm where I know the sourcing, I know what they're eating. And I also bleed every month. And so I run a little bit lower iron as it is. Now, if you have high iron, then you don't want to pour a bunch of red meat into your body because that's going to cause iron overload. So it's key to use some of these biomarkers like ferritin to help triangulate what you should be consuming, what you shouldn't be consuming. Somebody with high ferritin levels needs to give blood and eat less red meat. So going back to your answer or your question of what compromises the microbiome, other things that compromise the microbiome are things like alcohol. So alcohol is a potent cause of leaky gut and liver dysfunction. So I wouldn't recommend that. And then, smoking, terrible for gut health. It's really, really bad. Not exercising, surprisingly, can diminish diversity of the gut. And not eating a diverse diet can also inhibit diversity of the microbiome. So we want to maintain that diversity as much as we can by eating local produce if we can get it. What else talks over gut health? Antibiotics, NSAIDs are a big, big issue. People taking too many pain relievers, thinking that's going to fix their pain. It's actually going to probably contribute to worsening pain. So there's a vicious cycle of people get in pain, they take a pain reliever, and the pain reliever causes gut dysfunction, which causes more inflammation, which causes more pain. And stress, psychological stress, big cause of gut dysfunction is just the vagus nerve runs through the body and it affects the function of your digestion. So you can directly affect your digestion by just being stressed out.
You've touched on fasting. How does that impact the microbiome?
Oh, fasting is fantastic for the microbiome. One of the best things you can do. In fact, I had a friend whose wife has Crohn's disease, and she went into remission by fasting. That was the main thing that she did. And it was, I think she was doing 16 to 20 hours of fasting occasionally. It really affected my gut health in a positive way. But you got to keep in mind that if you're really, really, really stressed out, fasting is a stressor. So it's one of those mitochondrial stressors. It's good for you if you're not stressed and you can handle it. Bad for you if you're highly, highly stressed. So I will probably resume a little bit more fasting when my stress levels reduce a little bit this year. But where they're at today is that they're just a little too high. And so I do a little bit less fasting right now while my stress levels are a bit higher.
Okay, well, let's talk to the person right now who's feeling like they have the bandwidth for fasting, but they're not doing it right now. They're new to this.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend in the beginning?
Well, the first thing I would recommend for all fasting is I would recommend that a person gets into metabolic flexibility. So if you try fasting and you bonk immediately, and by bonking, I mean you go from feeling okay, this feels kind of good to oh my God, I'm going to die. It's a pretty good sign you're not metabolically flexible and you shouldn't be fasting. So people should be able to do a good 14 to 16 hour fast without a really big issue. And if you do struggle with like 16 hours, start with 12 and then go to 14 and then go to 16. But if you struggle with all of those, then start with ketosis, because ketosis is going to build your metabolic, basically becoming fat adapted means that you're building your body's ability to gear shift between carbs and fats. So one of the fastest way to do that is like a month of ketosis. Sometimes it takes 2 months for people who are really metabolically flexible, but then it'll be easier for you to fast. So that was what I did when I first started out, and it made a big difference in my fasting journey. I would also recommend magnesium, electrolytes, and bile acids if you struggle with fat metabolism. So some people who start fasting, they start getting gallbladder pain, and they need more bile acids because you're breaking down your own body's fat in that process.
And when it comes to the mitochondria, tying back to that central theme here, how does fasting impact those?
Well, what it does is it improves mitophagy because it throws out the mitochondria that don't carry a charge effectively. It improves autophagy, which is, really great for overall cellular functioning, just throwing out the proteins that are misfolded. So it cleans up the cell. And then on top of that, it makes the mitochondria function better because you have more effective mitochondria sitting around than all the dysfunctional ones. And then on top of that, it really creates the conditions where you just lower your inflammation level. It's just great for lowering inflammation. And then it's also great for balancing your blood sugar. Lowering your fasting blood sugar is one of the best things you can do for your metabolic health. So it reduces glycation of your cells. I mean, it's great. So the big thing that fasting is doing is you're flipping the metabolic switch from carb metabolism to fat metabolism, which is literally building metabolic flexibility. And also it helps you digest your fats laying around. So it helps clean out your liver, helps clean out the visceral fat, helps reduce the muscle fats, and that makes everything function better in the body.
You touched on the ketosis piece being a first step for somebody if they're not fasting at this point, the entry to getting there. Talk about, and you just mentioned the blood sugar piece. I'm curious how I know you're a big fan of measuring blood sugar and keeping that in check, and that's been a part of your health journey, managing that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
For somebody who this is new to them, let's talk about blood sugar, why it's important to manage, how we can go about testing that, and what range we want to keep that.
Well, I would recommend that people first get a finger stick monitor or a blood sugar monitor from Levels Health if you need it. I'm wearing a blood sugar monitor right now, and I'm like kind of curious where my blood sugar is at right now. I'm like, where is it at? And it's around 92, and that's pretty good given that I ate about an hour ago. So wearing a blood sugar monitor is going to tell you a few things. First is, what's your morning blood sugar look like? What does your fasting blood sugar look like? Your fasting blood sugar is a marker of your liver's insulin sensitivity. So how are your livers functioning overnight? And then on top of that, you have your post-meal blood sugar. So I guess before I should go on to post-meal blood sugar, let's talk about your fasting blood sugar ranges. Good is less than 100. Bad is greater than 100. Better is less than 95 to 90. Best would be like kind of like around 80 to 85. So like good is basically less than 100. Better is less than 90. And then, or less than like 95. And then like less than 85 is probably best. So you don't want to get super low, like 60s or so. Like that can be problematic for brain function. If you're really dropping really low in the middle of the night and you're not on a low carb diet, it could be because of low cortisol. So that could be a problem for people. It's just not being able to maintain a healthy blood sugar. But if you're regularly above 100, like it's oftentimes a sign of stress too. So you just having a higher blood sugar temporarily can be a stress signal. And then post-meal blood sugar is ideally less than 140. And that's where prediabetes sort of begins, is greater than 140. But then ideally, you want it kind of like less than 120 because that's optimal according to the American Academy of Clinical Endocrinologists. But in hunters and gatherer tribes, they don't really go above 110 because they're moving their bodies all day long. So that would be really, really optimal, but that's really hard to do in modern lifestyle. And then glycemic variability. The more noisy that your curve is, the more that you are going to struggle with like stress. Typically, it's usually in eating too often, snacking too much, that can cause glycemic variability.
And you mentioned the piece there about the hunter-gatherers and how moving helps regulate that. So an important hack we can share with the audience is the fact that after a meal, especially one if you're indulging in a little bit more carbs than usual. A way to hack that and keep the blood sugar lower is to go for even a 10-15 minute walk after the meal.
Yeah. And also like drinking a little bit of vinegar water before meals, that can help too. Just adding some vinegar to your meal. Pretty simple stuff.
Another one you mentioned in the book too, we'll add to the list here, is having your non-starchy veg first, then protein, and then having your starch at the end of the meal. So order of the meal can have an impact as well.
Meal order, meal timing is really key.
And for somebody who is totally new to this, they haven't measured their blood glucose, and now they're intrigued and they're thinking, okay, I don't even have any clue where mine's been all my life. What are some of the things people would notice if it's, going way out of the normal range? Obviously, if it's long-term, that would be diabetic, pre-diabetic.
Sure.
But for somebody who is relatively metabolically healthy, but they're having higher carbs, acutely, what are some of the things they'll feel if they're pushing that limit?
You can notice mood swings. Just like your energy levels will fluctuate highly. Getting tired after lunch. More acne is a good sign of blood sugar spikes. Too high blood sugar in general can cause more acne. And then on top of that, focus issues can be an issue for people. And what else? The big one is just not being able to go a few hours without eating, like your body constantly having to be eating in order to function.
One of the things I really enjoyed in your book was where you talked about not eating again for somebody who is measuring their blood sugar until it comes back down to 85 again. Which for somebody who is, typically snacking a lot and not really managing their blood sugar at this point, that can be a good baseline for people to really feel what hunger feels like.
Yeah.
Instead of, just giving into cravings and snacking throughout the day.
Totally. I mean, it's so easy to snack all day long, especially when we're stressed. We're like snack. But really learning to like sit with the feeling of hunger and be like, okay, cool. I can feel this. I'm not going to die, And even just like looking at your body and being like, where is my blood sugar right now? Like, do I really need to eat right now? And waiting till you're like 85 milligrams per deciliter or below can make a big difference in whether or not you're really hungry. Like most people don't know what real hunger is, and they're habituating to social cues instead of actual hunger.
A big theme throughout the book is obviously, like we keep harping on, the mitochondria and biohacking the mitochondria. So I think a fun thing we could do at this point is take us through a typical day. And again, it's going to be different. You're going through a stressful period right now. You're not pushing your fasting. So this is an N of one at this specific time frame for you. But take us through what you do in a day right now to biohack the mitochondria.
Sure.
And improve, the density of them and how they're functioning.
Yeah. So right now, so keep in mind that like I haven't always been in great metabolic health, and it fluctuates based on stress and lifestyle. So right now I'd say that like my main priority is stress management and just time management, because I've got so many things to do for this book launch. But the one thing I'm trying not to skip out on is just exercising every morning, because I know that when I exercise, I have this like amazing mood. Like my mood is just better for the rest of the day. So I look at exercise as medicine, and it's like, I just need to take my medicine, even if it's like a half an hour of riding my bike in the morning. I think I rode my bike for like an hour today, an hour on Wednesday Tuesday. And like I lifted weights yesterday, and weightlifting makes a big difference in my overall health. And then getting proper recovery in. I mean, to me, sleep is just so fundamental. I don't skip on sleep ever. And if you don't sleep well, you're going to have high cortisol and you're going to have higher insulin resistance. So that's important as well to understand. And then I also, what else am I doing? I mean, I generally eat lower carb, I'd say. But I really try to up the polyphenols as much as I can. Like I made this beautiful roasted vegetable soup that my friend gave me a recipe for. And it was like eggplant, tomato, onions, 4 heads of garlic, yellow pepper, yellow squash. And it was all roasted and then pureed with some beef broth. And Oh my God, it turned out so well. So I'm just getting tons of vegetables in my body. I also like to make like big veggie salads. Getting proper nutrition is really key. And then obviously, like, I'm not against coffee, but if you are really stressed out, you don't need to add more stress to your system. So just be careful with how much coffee you consume. I'm doing like maybe a cup every other day, but not every day. And then what else am I doing? I mean, social connection to me is really fundamental to optimal health, and it's kind of overlooked. But making sure that I have time every week with family and my friends that I care about, no matter how stressed out things get, I need life isn't worth to me, life is really worth living when you have people in your life that you care about and that you can interact with on a regular basis. So I'm going to see my friends this weekend, and I'm going to see some friends in LA next week, and I'm going to be in New York the week after. And this is going to be a really busy month. But I feel that human connection is like one of the most nourishing things for optimal metabolic health. Oxytocin is an anti-inflammatory, it's mitoprotective, it's an antioxidant, it's cardioprotective. So it is one of those things where if you can get that social connection that feels safe and positive, it can make a big difference in your mental health and your physical health.
I think the big challenge with social connection is that it's so subjective, right? Where if you look back on your week, you might be like, okay, I hung out with friends a couple times and I did a Zoom call with this person I work with and connected with family by FaceTime. But it's not like, things like intermittent fasting, you can be more objective with it, or what you're eating in a day. And so I think that one for me is a challenge to kind of make sure I'm embracing that on a regular basis. And I'm guessing
it's funny
for
you
others
mentioned
too.
That because I actually have a design of a product I want to build for my company that measures social connection and monitors it for you. And like, I know it's kind of like it's a little bit of a concern of privacy, but I would be totally willing to like give up some of my privacy for more data about myself and my life. Like I really think that we need social connection tools and monitoring tools, because it's the biggest driver in long-term health and happiness is relationship quality. And also your network is your net worth. And so I get a lot of work done when I go out with my friends, and I get a lot of knowledge and experience. And I rarely go out and feel like that was a waste of my time. Like rarely does that happen to me. But I think I'm fasting about 12 hours right now, just because I'm under a pretty heavy amount of stress. But I also what else am I doing? Oh, sunlight first thing in the morning. I mean, Huberman talks about this constantly, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get that bright morning light, and then darkness at night, really makes a big difference. And then try to break up your day when you're sitting at your desk. Just like break it up, like get up and make tea. I have like 3 cups next to me. I had coffee, I had some adaptogen tea, and it makes a really big difference. And then on top of that, like I do supplement when I need to. So I measure what I need through different labs, and I take like a B complex, a probiotic, digestive enzymes if I need them. And I've got a variety of different supplements that I rotate based on what my body needs. So, but the big ones that most people need are magnesium, omega-3s, vitamin D, minerals, and what else am I missing? And B complex.
So you're going through a really unique time right now. You're launching a book, and you've talked about the stress you're going through. What are some of the things you do to take extra good care of yourself and fill up the mitochondrial batteries during a time like this that you might not do otherwise?
I have on my feet right now, a PEMF mat. And so I'm kind of like, I can like feel this mat, and it's cool. It's called a Centropix mat. Anyway, if you go to Centropix, the website, and I think it's like /Dr. Molly, you might be able to get access to it, but you have to get it through a affiliate, I think. But I love this mat, and it's like sitting there under my feet, kind of passively charging my body with energy, which is cool. I also love this random thing that I bought it's this tuning fork. It's called a sonic slider, and it has a Schumann resonance, and it just kind of calms my nervous system at the end of a day, at the beginning of a day. I also meditate in the morning, so I'm either I'm either meditating, praying, or doing visualization first thing in the morning and first thing before I go to bed. And that's a really powerful space between sleep and wake that I consider to be really, really potent.
You've talked about some general supplements there. What about specific ones if you're feeling like your mitochondria are run down?
Sure.
And you really want to energize those things you might not take on a regular basis, but things you can use as biohacks for that
Yep.
specific purpose?
I would say L-car, carnitine essentially is an important tool in the mitochondrial toolbox. PQQ is a form of resveratrol that's really, really potent as well. You only have to take a tiny bit of it. ALA is another good one. And then, I would say those are like my generally recommended ones to take. I'm also a big fan of omega-3s as an anti-inflammatory.
And will you up your dosage of those if you're going through a stressful time or if you want to enhance mitochondria?
I take a ton of omegas. I'm like a huge fan of omega-3s.
And what brand are you using?
Oh, I switch brands all the time. The one I have right now is from a company in Norway, but I'm probably going to switch over to like Lovasa pretty soon. So Lovasa is a prescription grade omega-3 that I have prescribed to my clients. It's really high quality.
That's another thing I think it's important we get into. We've talked about supplements and different ones people might want to use for different uses, but quality is a big concern.
Oh my God.
And now, especially with the popularity of the health and wellness space, things seem to be blowing up, and you can go to grocery stores, Costco, you can go anywhere and get different supplements. As a doctor, what do you recommend? How do people know they're actually getting something of quality?
I mean, frankly, you have to talk to people that you can trust. And the problem is a lot of the best supplements are actually from other countries and they're not in the American market yet, which is kind of an annoying thing. But, you do want to do your homework on rancidity. A big majority of the fish oil in the market is very rancid. So you do need to watch that and make sure that you can buy the highest quality you can afford. Ideally, you want to look for pharmaceutical grade because they actually do sell pharmaceutical grade omegas pretty widely, but you need to look for that specific marketing description.
Okay. So basically work with somebody if you can, work with a functional medicine practitioner, and they're going to be able to guide you best and things are changing all the time too. That's the other piece of this where it's like, what is it you're taking right there?
These are omegas. I just pulled them out of my bag. I mean, the brand that I love is NPure 3, but they're not available in America yet. So you have to like literally go to Norway to get them. But they're the ones that Rhonda Patrick uses.
For somebody brand new to biohacking, which is in essence somebody, taking or doing different things to enhance their biology, where would you recommend they get started? What can they do to get the biggest bang for their buck?
Cut out the sugar in your diet and remove the bread, pasta, pies, pastries, chips, candy, and bread as much as you can. Like these are the products that if you do have metabolic dysfunction and you put a blood sugar monitor on, like put one of these things on and then start looking at the things that spike you. And to me, the things that spike me the most are these products, the white flour products, refined carbohydrate products, and sugar products. So if I eat a lot of those, I get bigger blood sugar spikes. If I don't eat a lot of them, I don't. Now, I'm not like a total Nazi. Like I will eat chocolate and I will eat candy occasionally, but it's not like I make it a big part of my life, honestly. It's really not supposed to be a big part of your life.
And how did you personally fall into this world as a medical doctor? You're talking about a lot of things that most medical doctors wouldn't be aware of or doing themselves. Let's talk about your story and how you fell into everything we're talking about today.
Well, I was in medical school and I was struggling with my health. And so I went to my psychologist and he was like, "You're not crazy. You're not depressed or anxious. You're just not taking care of yourself." And I was like, "Well, what do I need to do to take care of myself?" And he's like, "Go figure it out." And I was like, "Okay." And so I went and figured it out and dramatically improved my test anxiety, dramatically improved my brain function, dramatically improved my performance in school. And that led to me being like, "Oh my God, there's something really to this. This is really important." So that led to me being like, okay, so if improving my health improves my performance, what's this mechanism? And so I've always been like really searching for an answer of like, what is health about? How do you measure it? How do you make more of it? And so I kind of just felt like, okay, there's got to be something else to this, than just like we all know we should eat right and exercise, but like why? And it was really through sequentially over the course of 15 years, slowly improving my health that led to me being at a point in my life where I feel like pretty unstoppable. And at the same time, like finally kind of aware of my limitations. Cause last year was I think I pushed myself to the point of like, okay, this is probably not sustainable long term. But I got to that sort of peak performance level where I was like, there's always like a question of like, okay, so how much can I perform before my body breaks? And this last year was like a pretty good predictor of like, okay, there is a limit to what I can do before things start to break down. But what I love about health is that the more that you build health into your body, the more that you can do. And the more capacity that you have, the better performance that you get, and the more exploring you can do, the more physical health that you can run with. And that's pretty exciting. So I'm really looking forward to more balance next year personally. Like my goal of next year is like balance and harmony, but this year was about like peak performance and like expansion and testing myself and seeing what I could actually do in 1 year. So that was pretty cool.
Coming back to early in your journey during med school when your health started to fall apart, to me, it seems like a couple things had to fall into place for you to get to where you are today. One being luck to connect with the right people, and two being determination and willingness to, not settle for how you're feeling and you want to push through and make yourself feel better. When it comes to connecting, the part I really want to focus in on here is connecting with the right people because, you're in a conventional system at that time and you're learning a conventional way of treating patients. How did you break free of that and find this other alternative, quote unquote, world, and then find good people that led to you continuing to learn and build this knowledge base that you have today?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, when I first started out, I was like, I made a really ballsy move. I decided to leave my residency and get my license anyway. And it was really risky. But I was like, I'm going to take a big leap of faith and I'm going to go and have some courage and build my own medical practice and do medicine my way, which is about optimizing health. And I figured it was fairly low risk because I was just focused on health instead of focusing on disease and drugs and stuff. So I just, first of all, had courage. Courage is really important. But I also had bravery. I was like not afraid to go talk to strangers. I was not afraid to find opportunity. I was not afraid to go out and ask for what I wanted. And I found a job, which was fortunately for me, I got connected to some really powerful people in Silicon Valley that became mentors. And those mentors opened up doors for me. And I asked for what I wanted. I learned how to ask. So it was like a sense of urgency of needing to have a job, but it was also a desire to like, what do I need? What do I really want? What do I need? And what can I go out and ask for? And then it was a lot of working for very little money for a very long time in order to prove myself in the technology space and build a reputation as an innovator. So that was really interesting. It was just kind of like going out and seeking opportunity by just saying, hey, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And it was like a lot of helping people for very little money for a long time that built my reputation as somebody who's an innovator because I just did project after project after project for company after company after company. And that was, that's what you do when you're young. When you're young, your job is to go out and build your network and to build your expertise and to be helpful. And then when you're older, you've already got that expertise and your time is more valuable. You don't have as much of it. And so you need to spend it more carefully. And so you got to pick and choose who you spend your time with. But I spent a long time building a really strong social network, which made a big difference in my capacity to like sort of like be seen as an expert. And then it didn't hurt that I taught at Stanford. So that was kind of fascinating, was like the ability to teach at Stanford was pretty unique. I didn't really anticipate that being part of my life, but it was a really cool opportunity that I got to have.
One thing that becomes really apparent really quickly talking to you is this drive you have. And I'll highlight something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this using, health and wellness to be able to do more. So using all this knowledge and things you're doing to be able to propel yourself and do more and accomplish more. What I'm curious, where does that come from? Is it genetic? Is it part of how you were brought up? Like, you have this drive and you're doing so many things and juggling so much. And you're talking about how next year you need to slow down, which is great that you're thinking ahead and planning in a bigger sense like that. But where does that come from?
Well, my dad is an entrepreneur, and he took over a failed business in the family and turned it into a very successful business. And so I saw his work ethic slowly over years reap benefits from consistency. And so I also have a sister who's like a famous painter, and she's an extraordinary talent, and she has an incredible work ethic. So I kind of grew up with people with really good work ethics. That was like part of our family culture, was everybody worked. And even my mom, who was she wasn't just a mom. Like, she was an exceptional mother. She was an absolutely beyond talented mom. She took her job very seriously and made our lives really profoundly filled with love and nourishment and connection. So I think I got a major advantage with the family I was gifted as from God. So, like, literally, I think I have the best family in the world. And it's rare to have so many people that I can genuinely call up whenever I need help. Like, every single one of my family members I trust with my life and have my back, and I have their backs. And that's really special and really not as common these days, which is kind of sad. But I think there's a big emphasis on family in our family, and I also just I don't know. I think I was competitive from like a very early age. Like, I had a traumatic birth, and so I kind of grew out of the womb, was like kind of fighting for my life. And then when I got to kindergarten, I remember there being different reading groups and being like, and if there are different reading groups, I am going to be in the best one. And so it was always like this awareness of like, I want to be the best I can be. And I had a knowing that I was kind of special, but not like a narcissistic special. I was like, I'm weird and different, and that's okay. But I just knew I was kind of like a outlier as a kid. I knew I wasn't a normal child. I always knew that I was a little bit different than other kids. And I kind of like accepted that about myself, and knew I wasn't going to be good at everything I did, but knew that if I tried hard enough, then I would be able to succeed. So there was like this kind of awareness that like, I'm smart, but I'm not like the smartest kid in the room. I'm street smart. That's going to give me some advantages over other kids. Like, I knew I had that, I had certain things that were like beneficial that were, that a lot of kids didn't have. I think I was kind of born with street smarts from my dad. And then I was born with book smarts from my mom. So my mom's mom was a valedictorian of her class. So I just was, and my mom is extraordinarily creative. And so creativity runs on my mom's side pretty heavily. And then business sense runs on my dad's side. So I got a pretty unique parent mix. And then I think growing up in Peoria, Illinois was weirdly an advantage, because it was in a test market for a lot of things. So I kind of grew up in this environment where like our family always wanted to be on, like, we always wanted to be like, we always wanted to pick up the coolest, newest technologies. So I grew up in a very technologically savvy family. Like, my dad had the second cell phone in the city I grew up in. So we were always getting the technology first. So my dad was always very tech centric, tech forward. And then I also had a mom who loved to cook. So my mom was very, very focused on, learning to be the best cook she could be. And we all became cooks in our family. So learning how to cook was really a big advantage too. And then, I think, I was very fortunate to get to go to medical school in the same town I grew up in. And so the doctor that delivered me helped me learn how to perform a C-section, and she became my OBGYN. So there's a lot of full circle a lot of social connection was a big part of my life. I think social connection is a big advantage. I think having a strong social network. So I built my social network pretty heavily in my 20s and 30s. And that's really reaped a lot of dividends for me. So I think that surrounding yourself with people that inspire you and that can teach you that you can do anything you put your mind to is a really cool thing. It's a really, really cool thing to think about.
As somebody that is so driven and knows that about yourself, and you're going through a time right now where you need to put your head down and really grind with the book again launching, do you have certain things in place bumpers, we'll call them, to make sure you don't push too hard? Do you have certain like checks in place to make sure that you don't over exceed what you're capable of?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say the big one is lab testing. You got to take your own medicine. So like if I put my lab tests on, or if I like put I put a blood sugar monitor on today here, this is from, this company sent me those, keeping an eye on your biomarkers, looking at your HRV, looking at your blood sugar, making sure that you're keeping tabs on these markers of health. Like I could see that my stress was starting to affect my blood sugar. And I was like, uh-oh, I got to chill the fuck out. So I took a vacation. And a lot of people are like, how can you take a vacation when you're just about to launch a book? And I was like, well, look, I'm going to work the first week. And then the second week, I'm going to take off. And I got some work done on the second week. I didn't totally disconnect, but I definitely got enough recovery in that made a big difference in my overall well-being. So, taking periodic breaks is key. I also did NAD therapy with my friend Katrine in October. I think it was, October. And that was a big, reboot. But I also was talking to her about how, it was a month later, I'd caught a cold. And she was like, Molly, you are like an Olympic athlete and you're acting like, a teenager, because I'd gone to I spent 2 separate weekends going to a music festival. And she's like, you need to start training like an Olympic athlete. So having friends that you can trust that will give you an honest opinion of what's going on, like will honestly tell you if you're thrown off, that's really helpful. So having the biggest checks and balances for me are my family and my friends. So if my family and my friends are like, if I'm coming to them and they're mirroring back to me, hey, I can tell you're really stressed out right now, you might need to take a break, then I listen, And also I just like, I do think if you don't meditate consistently, you're not going to be able to hear your intuition. So I hired a spiritual coach and she gave me a lot of tools in the toolbox to really tap into my body's inner wisdom. And I know it's there, but I don't always listen to it. So I try to really listen to my inner wisdom if I can. And that's been a big help too.
You mentioned having a cold there. For somebody who has this awareness and these biohacks and tools in your back pocket, what would that look like for you when you start to feel symptoms of a cold come on?
Oh.
What are some supplements you might take, some practices, some biohacks that you would throw at it?
The big one that I have right here is this one called Biovegetarian. And it's a really heavy duty cold medicine. It's great. It's a fantastic immune booster. I love that tool. But I would do all the same things I already do, but I would just add things like I would just add the zinc and Biovegetarian by Priority One. My friend Talia, Dr. Talia, is this naturopath in the Bay Area, and she taught me about Priority One immune booster, and that was really helpful. So big fan of that.
So obviously anybody who's tuned into this point knows a big common thread and something you're really thrusting upon us is the social connection.
Yeah.
And the importance of that and maintaining your health and well-being. So what I'm curious about is somebody, say they're tuning in and they're already 40 years old and that's not been something they've built and maintained over the years. It can be hard to form those connections later in life. So
sure.
As somebody later in life realizing the importance of these connections and then looking at their life and saying, I haven't done a good job of maintaining and building those, and say we'll even throw another layer on top of that, they're introverted and they're not somebody that likes to go out and be in social situations. How do they go about doing that later in life?
I've been asked this a lot lately, like, how do you make friends? And I didn't realize that I was like, actually really good at making friends until people were like, hey, how do I make friends? And I was like, oh, here's all the ways you make friends. And they were like, I didn't even know that. I was like, I didn't know people didn't know how to do this until I started studying social connection. I started talking to people and they were like, I have no idea how to make a friend. And I was like, oh my God, 1 in 10 women and 1 in 5 men have no friends. That is insane. And it's a really big issue. And I'm super committed to figuring out how to help people with this. So, I haven't downloaded any apps for friendship yet, but there are apps that are out there for making friends. It's Just Lunch is one for business friends. If you want to make business contacts, I think there's like no, that's a dating app. There's one there's an app for sure for business connections, and I'm trying to think of this app, but I don't know. I have to look it
If
up.
you think of it later, we'll put it in the show notes.
A big one is going to the gym. So I'm like a big believer that a lot of people would benefit from going to the gym, and gyms are a great place to make friends. And like group exercise, like martial arts, if you're an introvert, take a Tai Chi class, take a Qigong class. It's not going to be a lot of loud noise. It's going to be very calming for your nervous system. Tai Chi, Qigong is great. I like weightlifting. I like going to the gym. My gym is a social club, so I'm very lucky. I live like 10 minutes from my gym, maybe less than that. But there's a lot of walking clubs, jogging clubs, cycling clubs in most cities, especially cities that have like marathons or half marathons. So like joining a running club, joining a fitness club is a great thing. CrossFit's great, but I wouldn't recommend CrossFit to most people because everybody I know who becomes a CrossFit expert ends up injuring themselves. And so as much as CrossFit's a great form of exercise, it really depends on your form. So please, 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 if you're going to do CrossFit, please get proper form. Cause like, I don't really like the fact that everyone I know who's been a CrossFit expert or CrossFit obsessor has hurt themselves. But a CrossFit's a great way to make friends. I was just in Puerto Rico and I was really amazed by like the beach activities people have. So there was all these people playing beach volleyball, and there's a bunch of volleyball clubs in my town. So I'm planning on joining a volleyball team and doing some martial arts. So like fitness is a great way to make friends. Also taking classes, just for edification is a great way to make friends. Just taking a local cooking class, taking some classes where you have to actually interact with people. Great way to meet people. And then if you have one friend, you can have 10 friends. So one of the best ways to make friends is to make friends with social animals. So like if people become friends with me, I will make sure that they are friends with like 10 other people that I think are awesome. So it's really, really good to just try to make friends with social butterflies because they're going to introduce you to more people and to more events. And that can be really helpful too, is just being able to go out and meet people that way through friends. So friends of friends. And then like, I like throwing events. If you are an extrovert, like I like having people over for dinner. I like organizing dinners. I like having people over just to hang out and relax and recover. Walking down the street and bringing your neighbors, baked goods or a meal or like something you made for them is a good way to make a friend. People love free food. So that can be nice too. And then, but I think also, hobbies are really helpful too. So like hobbies are overlooked ways to make friends, but like, if there's something that you really love to do, go find a meetup group that has the same interest in that. So like I'm big into biohacking. There's biohacking groups all over Austin. So that's a great way to meet people is through that. And then another thing is career. So a big place to make friends is having a job. So if you have a job in a specific industry, you can go make friends through that industry. So like I go to conferences, I organize conferences, I travel to events for, business related things. And if I'm going to another city where I know one friend, I'll usually try to ask them, hey, would you be interested in like organizing a dinner for a few people with me? And so you can make friends really quickly by just asking other friends of yours to help organize things when you're in town. So, I didn't build my network overnight. Like I built my network very intentionally over the last 10 years. And I specifically wanted to have a network that was multinational and that would enable me to be able to visit different cities and feel like I'm at home in different places. And that took me 10 years to do, but it was like a clear decision that I made. I was like, I'm going to have friends in multiple continents. And now I do. And I could pretty much travel anywhere in the country and have people open up their homes to me, which is really, really special. And it says a lot about, my ambition, I guess. I still very much, a lot of people like stop making friends as they get older, but I think it's one of those things that you just have to do. Like it's an exercise, like it's really easy to become isolated. So it's work. I'm not going to say it's not work, but I think it's really fun. If you can make it fun, then you'll be more incentivized to do it.
Hearing you give that answer gets me thinking about analog versus digital.
Yeah.
And we've
Social media
given
too. Don't get me wrong.
a
I have
good
friends.
array throughout our conversation of different ways, like through testing, using technology. And even when I asked you initially how to connect with other people, you went to an app. So it's interesting. It sounds like you've found this good dynamic balance between technology and analog and connecting with people in person.
Yeah.
But how do you go about thinking about that? What the curiosity that got sparked in me as you're giving that last answer is, with technology, the way that things are, changing exponentially, and there's apps for everything, and technology and biohacking, there's so much technology involved in that space.
Yeah.
How do we make sure we're still grounded in the analog while taking advantage and utilizing technology and maintaining the balance like it sounds you've been able to do over the years to this point?
Well, one of my friends has this company called In Real Life, IRL. And it's pretty cool because basically it's like an event. It's like an event app. It's designed to get people in actually into their lives, which is cool. I haven't actually used it. Which is funny. I don't really know what it's like to use. I think it's like a social network. But there's like, even just like searching this, it's like there's Wink, Make New Friends, which has like almost 5 stars, which is pretty cool. Fam, Make New Friends Live. I mean, I think what I've found is I do have a lot of friends off social media, but I also have a lot of friends from the real world. And I personally have a general rule of like, take every opportunity you can to connect. Even if it's like for an hour, even if you just go out for an hour, if someone invites you to something, take them up on that opportunity, because it's great to meet new people. And then let's see here. I mean, I do spend a lot of time on social media. I wish I didn't have to, but it's part of my job. So I do think that like one of my biggest challenges is being able to keep track of Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. I've got way too many platforms, but I do think it makes it a little bit more possible for me to maintain my network by having the digital connections as well. So, I mean, I have 4 emails too, so there's like quite a lot of connectivity in my life, I'd say.
Right, but I think this even goes beyond that when it comes to things like using devices to track, like Oura Ring, and having different tests done, and the future of quantifying everything. It's just interesting to think about where this is all going, and again, taking advantage of the technology and using it in a healthy way, but still maintaining that feet on the ground, primal, ancestral,
human
like
touch,
kind of having the best of both worlds. I just
we need
it's interesting to think about.
We need human touch. We can't ignore the need for touch, I mean, like dogs are great, cats are great, but you still need human connection, I used the app Clubhouse during the pandemic, but I definitely didn't feel like it really replaced people. I still needed friends. And when I started hanging out with my friends when I started hanging out with my friends in like February of 2021, I remember just being like so high on life. I was like, this is the greatest thing in the whole world. Just people, just being with people. I was like, that's when I really was like, oh my God, this is the thing. Like, love is the answer. Connection is the answer. And yet, like, I'm still challenged by relationships. I've had friends that I don't talk to anymore. I've had exes that I don't speak to anymore. Like, things go wrong in life. That's going to be part of existence too. I've had friends who've gotten ostracized. I've had rumors spread about me. Like, the reality is that we're still in a very like wild world, but you got to be fearless and courageous to fight for what is good for you. And I do think that, like, the more that you succeed, the more that you got to be careful with who you surround yourself with. You got to be really cognizant of like, not everybody's friendly, not everybody's safe. Some people are just toxic and you got to avoid them. But like, you also just got to accept that some people are going to come and go from your life. Some people are going to be long-term friends. Some people are going to be short-term friends. I have friends that I just visited for the first time in years, and it was like no time had passed. So like, those are the kind of friends that I love, is those people that like, it doesn't really matter like how much time passes, we still feel strong when we're together. Like, that's pretty cool.
But a piece of this too, I want to make sure we highlight before we part ways, is the fact that just as technology continues to, change and expand, there's likely going to be this gray area between, certain supplements and drugs, things we can take to potentially enhance mitochondria, a certain pill we can take. And us as people that are interested in this and biohacking the body and getting the most out of our health and wellness, there's going to be decisions to be made whether we want to take those things, whether we want to track everything in the body as technology continues to, again, allow for us to go deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So I just think it'll be interesting in the next 10 years as this all expands out, how far people want to push it. And it's already happening. But just as this continues to be, more options continue to be on the table for people like us that are into this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think technology is going anywhere. If anything, it's going to continue to permeate our lives in bigger and bigger ways. So that's unavoidable. But I do think that more people are going to start to realize that they're going to just be like, I don't need all this social media. I don't need all of this data all the time, every day. I do want to get off the dopamine treadmill. And I think there will be a return to in-person connection, but the trends right now are not looking good. The trends are really less and less time with people. So that's part of the reason why I started a company all about social connection and really trying to cover sexuality, love, attachment, social connection in a big way as a platform approach to the science of human health and connection. And it's really, it's a missing piece in the health puzzle, and yet the piece that contributes the most to long-term happiness and health. So that's why I'm building some stuff in this space. Yeah.
What's the name that's under?
It's called Adamo Bioscience, and it means to fall in love in Latin. And it's all about, how do you, I thought when I was younger that love was this like hand wavy Disney things that we sang about, right? And then when you really start looking at love, it's not the prettiest thing you've ever seen. There's a lot of dangerous love out there. There's stalking, there's harassment, there's frankly murder, there's injury, there's domestic abuse, there's divorce, there's mate poaching and mate guarding, and there's all sorts of stuff that like makes love a lot more complicated of a science than I even anticipated. So I'm really interested in solving human problems. And so the areas that I'm particularly interested in are sexuality and social connectivity.
And for somebody whose interest is piqued and they want to look into Adamo, is there a website? Is there a social media account? What can they go and connect?
We're doing
and
a
how can
rebrand
they
right
be part
now.
Of this?
We're doing a rebrand. So we'll be putting up a new website probably in February. And it's a very exciting time.
All right. Well, you can share the link with me. I can put it in the show notes.
Sure.
We're going to link up the Spark Factor. We're going to link up your social media website. Dr. Molly, this was a far-reaching conversation. We covered a lot about connection, a lot about the mitochondria and everything in between. So really enjoyed this. People are going to get a lot from it. Thank you for the work you're doing and keep doing the great work. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Bye-bye.
Now that you're done my conversation with Dr. Molly, you're going to want to stick around here and catch my chat with Kara, where you're going to learn how to reduce your biological age. There's a lot more to learn. I'll see you over there.
We were able to change gene expression towards something more youthful. So our participants actually got over 3